So here we'll go through all of the logs and I'll tell you what's in each one. Now, all of these are not going to be pertinent on a day-to-day basis, but I do want to let you know what's there and what's in them just so you're aware. So the very first one is the Adhd log. Now, this is the dedupe log. This captures everything for dedupe, direct to dedupe, and remote dedupe. This also covers any sort of remote connections to other clusters. So if you have a remote DR site, either on the other side of the world or just on the other side of the data center, the communication between these clusters will be logged in the Adhd logs. If you have a dedupe issue, the Adhd log is the log to use. And we have an appliance folder. This has a couple different logs in it. Now, this is generally the CDS hardware or the VM host for Sky, the VM level logs. This will talk about things like the actual condition of the host, the actual VM that is hosting the Sky. If that's suffering an issue, that will be logged in here. If you have a failover or failback, all that gets logged in here as well. And a lot of your hardware type signaling, your interfaces going up and down, all of those things are captured in the appliance folder. The connector is the one I believe most users are going to be familiar with. This is where the UDS agent log lives. Would imagine just about everybody who's got some time with our Actifio unit does know what the UDS agent logs are. And we're actually going to dive into those a little bit deeper than our documentation provided with the connector does. Next is the database logs. Now, this is not the actual platform database. This is not the Postgres database that sits in the CDS. These are the Postgres logs. Generally not very useful to the end user. However, if you are Postgres savvy and you'd like to take a look through them, feel free. DDS is dedupe transaction logging. Now, what this really is, these are really performance metrics. This is how quickly we're moving across the disk, what our throughput of data is when we're trying to deduplicate. There is some what I will call user readable log messages in here, mainly for our dedupe engineers. But again, we're going to put all these logs right on your desktop, so feel free to take a look. Flasher, this is the log that coordinates between a couple of our services, and this covers the creation of vDisks. vDisks and staging disks, for the context of this presentation, are really the same thing. So you will see them used interchangeably. A lot of places I'll note both names just to help you make that connection. The install folder contains the install logs. If you're trying to self-install the Sky and it's trying to give you a little bit of trouble, you can pull these install logs down and you'll get a more verbose, maybe more useful bit of logging to help you troubleshoot your installation. Networking is exactly what it sounds like. That's going to be routing, default routes, interface events. If you have any sort of specialized routing, all of that's going to be in the network folder. This is actually one of the folders that we capture prior to upgrading your appliance. So if there are any issues and the routes aren't the same after the upgrade, we can then go into that network folder and start putting things back the way they were. Next is OMD. Now, OMD is the Object Manager Daemon. This works in conjunction with Flasher for the creation and deletion of vDisks. This also is what tracks use of vDisks. So when you go into your UI and you take a look at all your vDisks, how you've got them allocated across your different appliances, the OMD service, or Object Manager Daemon, is the actual service that's displaying all that information for you. The pserv, this is our main communications service. This speaks with Tomcat. It talks to our Actifio database that I referenced a moment ago. It's also going to talk directly to VMware via your vSphere or ESX API. It interprets commands from our CLI. It tracks system health. It runs the scheduler. And it also, without propelling GC, does kind of monitor it. GC is largely going to be logged in the Adhd log, which we saw first. Then we've got the StreamSnapD. This is disk to remote disk replication. Now, this is anytime we're going to send data across the wire without deduping it in the traditional remote dedupe fashion. A system log, for you Unix fans or Linux fans, this will be a little bit more familiar to you. We have the command log, which is the CLI history, the same output that you would get if you ran history on a Unix machine. We've got the fuse disk error log. So if we were trying to create a staging disk out of your set of M disks, and it does result in an error, those errors with more specific output like UUIDs, paths, will be called out in the fuse disk error log. Messages, this is, again, for Unix folks, this is just like varlog messages. For people maybe less savvy with Unix, these are a lot of system level messages. When a drive gets mounted, you'll see it logged here. You'll see be assigned a drive, letter, partition, what have you. The Ssd Config Log only tracks events that occur with the SSD. So if you're not using SSDs, you just kind of expect a lot of noise in here. It will say, hey, we still don't have SSDs, kind of in perpetuity until SSDs are installed. And if you don't ever plan to install them, there really isn't much need to dig into this log. Next will be Tomcat. That's exactly the Tomcat you're thinking of. It's a web service. You'll also see this under Catalina.log. This is communications with the Actifio desktop and our resource center. For those of you who may not be familiar, if you go to the IP address of your CDS in a web browser, it will bring you to a resource center, which has connectors, documentation, self-service networking panel, all kinds of great little tools to help you get going with the Actifio appliance. Then we've got the OpenVPN logs. Now this is strictly for Secure Connect. That is the connection mechanism by which our support or services team may use to connect directly to your appliance remotely. Almost done. So next we've got UDP MQD. We really don't spend much time looking at this one. This is the multiplexing logging for the UDP engine to snap storage. So our UDP engine is the engine that actually moves all of the data around within the CDS, and we can access your data via multiple paths. We are leveraging the exact sort of multipathing that you are going to set up between your physical host or your virtual cluster and your storage. So if you've got 4 or 5 paths that we can access your storage with, the UDP MQD log will describe how we're utilizing those different paths to get the UDP engine into play in multiple channels. UDPPM, this has got the shortest definition, but probably the largest use case. This is the scheduling and operation of jobs. This is snapshots, dedupe, remote dedupe, the scheduler, everything that pserv, that's the platform service log, interprets from either the UI or the CLI, is then interpreted into a command that our UDP engine can understand, and the UDP engine is what actually takes action on the things that you clicked in the UI or the things that you typed in the CLI. And then we have a CDS side version of the connector log. Now you've got your UDS agent log that sits on your host. We've got a little bit more verbose log. It's not so important if you understand how to read the UDP log, and we're going to spend a lot of time in that today. I want to make sure that you have a very thorough understanding of how to get through there, and it's not necessarily what I would call human readable. Thank you for joining us for another YouTube Tech Tip video. If you like the content you're seeing on this channel, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you will be alerted to any future content.